Serious, teachers of Reddit. What is the surprisingly smartest thing your stupidest student has ever said? Just this past Tuesday, I had a student struggling with science homework, actually math skills, but for my science class, he was almost mute about what he needed, what he didn't understand, no matter how much I tried to guide him through unit conversions. The study period was ending and I had to let him go with little progress made. As he was packing up, he told me I'll try it again after art class. I'm usually smarter at this after I do some art. I thought that was an interesting observation, and I asked him why he thought that might be the case. He said, "I'm pretty good at art. It's easier to try hard stuff while I still feel like I'm good at something, because I want to keep feeling like that." That's the entire educational psychology argument for fostering a sense of competency and the support of intrinsic motivation. In the fewest words possible, I actually think he's one of my smartest students, really. He just struggles to make it show on paper. I'm glad he recognized that makes him learn better and acted on it. I did poor in maths through high school and college, until my last year when I said frick it to the way I was taught. Spent way more time than normal trying to find a way to study that works for me, and managed to pass. Scout leader, doing first aid with some cubs. I ask one lad, how do you treat a burn, and he replies with respect. When I was in first grade, we were being taught a bit about first aid. We got to the point about sterile bandages and such, and they asked if anyone knew what sterile meant. I raised my hand and said, in a puzzled tone, "It means you can't make babies." I had a band-aid on my elbow, one of the big ones, and my student was trying to work out what it was. It was a drunken fall. I said ninjas had got me. He said it sounded like a ninjury. I laughed out loud, while in reality it was a ginjury. This kid isn't dumb, but most of the things he says are, just because he talks a lot and likes to argue. This kid goes to a private school which is open for 11 hours every day, even though the school day runs for 7 hours. If parents need to drop their kids off early or pick them up late, they have that option. He told me that he really wanted to get a dog, but his parents won't do it because there would be no one home to take care of the dog most of the time. The rest of the conversation went like this. Me, that makes sense. Puppies and dogs need lots of attention. It wouldn't be nice to leave them home alone all day. Kid, well, we could bring it to doggy daycare. Me, every day? If someone is taking care of your dog for 8 hours every day, is that even your dog? Him, well, that's what they do with kids. So real and so sad. That moment has stayed with me for a few years now. I think about this a lot. My son spends 40 waking hours a week at school and only about 50 waking hours a week with me, my husband. It reminds me to make those hours count. When I was teaching subtracting across 0, 507-254, to second graders, one kid said it's like when your mom needs milk and you go to your neighbor and no one is there, so you go to the next door. Me, how do you know if something is alive? Them, if you can kill it. Technically not wrong. I don't know if this counts, but I was teaching a public speaking class. It was mostly 9th grade. They were all nervous about their first big speech, and I tried to ease their nerves by saying, "I promise giving a speech won't kill you." Then, some kid shouted, "Do you know how many people in history have died while giving a speech?" I mean, he had a point. Probably my favorite answer in the thread. I was on lunch duty one day and a middle school boy jokingly said, "Mr. Original Sanitizer, you wanna buy me an extra?" I replied with, "Do I look like your daddy?" He replied, straight-faced, "I don't know, you might. I ain't never met him, I bought him an extra." Comma, frick. I hate the word in describing this kiddo, and it wasn't so much what she said, but did. She certainly wasn't stupid, but as an at-risk youth counselor I can say she was very low functioning. She went AWOL one night out of the blue. Not one staff saw her leave. Usually when this happens, kids go do dumb kid stuff like going to a park to drink and smoke. Teenage crap. Well, we didn't see her for 2 days. We finally got a phone call from a person who had taken her in. 400 some miles away. When she got back to our facility she had this nervous look, knowing I was gonna scold her. I didn't. I was too freaking impressed. I asked her how she did it, and she said she kept hopping buses. I guess none of the drivers had the heart to kick her off, so there she went. I took a very big risk in the fact that I congratulated her on her journey. Her eyes lit up when I told her she had managed to travel farther than any kid that had ever gone AWOL. She never did it again and actually graduated the program with success. Still a booger, but I'll always remember that booger. Dang, that reminds me of the time a kid in my crappy Christian school decided she was fecking done with it all and disappeared for 2 weeks. She would later call her family from fricking Mexico. We lived in Virginia. I teach ESL. I had a student about 7 and we were all doing the workbook. The lesson revolved around things like big and small, old and new, clean and dirty, as well as toys, like dolls, balls, yo-yos, and this that these those. It is easily one of my least favorite lessons because it really is a lot for the young students to understand. The photo was a boy pointing to a desk with a few small, round objects on it. The girl was taking forever, but she always seemed a bit slower in class, and so I wasn't too shocked. I was checking the other students' work and figured she would finish in time and I would help her at the correction stage. Finally she makes it up to my desk and I get to the picture. The obvious answer was these are small balls. What did she have though? These are marbles. The kids hadn't even learned that word. How she came up with it left me absolutely baffled. But from that point on, I never questioned her intelligence. I figured she just knew different things, but it didn't mean she didn't understand. She clearly just spent 30 minutes racking her brain for the best word for small balls. ESL. Every day is a surprise. I think this is exactly what OP was looking for. I teach first grade so many not as dramatic as other replies. I had a kid who is kind of never quite paying attentions. We read a dinosaur book and were answering very basic first grade questions in the back of the book. It literally had a brachiosaurus and said, the dinosaur's legs are A. long, B. short. He pretty much got stuck here and didn't move on. To me, it was the easiest question in the book, but some of the students are low-level English learners, so it is possible he just couldn't understand the words long or short. After like 7 minutes of doing my rounds and assisting other students, I came back to him. He had written in C. long and short are both opinion words. I'm a lawyer, and so is this kid. When I was teaching grade 5 a few years back, I had a student who really struggled academically and misbehaved a lot. During one of his punishments, which was washing dishes with me from our morning breakfast time, I straight up asked him why he kept getting into trouble. The boy admitting that he just knew that if he misbehaved he would get to spend time with me one, and we would talk about life and his hobbies and such. I found out later on that his father had been incarcerated for pretty much the entirety of the boy's life. So, the stupidest and most misbehaved kid in the class was actually just playing the system the whole time, and really just needed a positive male role model in his life. After that, I told him he didn't need to act up in order to spend time with me. He could just ask for extra responsibility and I would give it to him. He was, mostly, better behaved after that. I miss him a lot. Thank you for being that guy. I grew up with a rotating door of abusive male role models, and the teachers who found that responsibility in their laps are the only reason I made it. I made sure to tell them that. I hope your kid does the same someday. Used to teach chess to elementary level kids. Would run chess camp over the summer. 20-40 kids come in every day for a full school day, but every period is basically a chess class. Lasts a week. On the first day, I would tell kids they need to lose to get better, which is true in a game like chess, especially in the beginning. I would tell them you have to lose 50 games before you can improve in chess. Well, on about day 3 I'm walking from the field to the class and see one of my students, second grader, walking the other direction and ask him offhand, how's chess going? And he responds, well, I've lost all of my games so I guess I'm doing great. That's true in a lot of games. One thing that separates an average player from a really great player for any sort of game is the ability to analyze why they lost and view what they did objectively. Learning should be the goal, winning is just the fruit of your labors. I'm teaching English as a foreign language and one of my students hasn't been attending for a year. When he finally came, I gave him an essay to write. He wrote it in perfect German because he thought that we were studying German. The guy had been learning German all year long only to learn that we were studying English. This is both the smartest and the stupidest thing I can imagine. Elementary school. I worked in the school admin office for a while. We had a cop come in to speak to the kids, basically to warn them on the dangers of strangers and random people speaking to them in the street. The cop was great and told the kids how they should always be careful and that some bad men might take them away from their mummies and daddies. One kid puts his hand up and asks a question, so what will happen if we go with one of these stranger men? The cop wasn't prepared for that question and just said how sad it would be and how his parents would miss him. A few days later a new buzzword was going around the school which phonetically sounded like pedophile. The kid had looked up online or spoke to someone and then told the other kids and schools about what pedophiles do. It scared the heck out of some of the kids and the principal had to come to each class to calm the kids down. That kid probably did more to make sure no one left the school with a stranger than the cops. If you were an inch taller you'd be round. You just can't punish wordplay like that. When learning mythology, Mr. If centaurs have 2 arms and 4 legs, does that make them insects? I was making a joke about mermaids to a 6-year-old. If a mermaid is a person on top and a fish on the bottom, is a person on bottom fish on top a mermaid too, or is it something else? Kid pauses and says, well no, it's not a mermaid, because if you have a fraction like 1/2 it's not the same as 2/1. I thought that was both the cleverest answer to that question I ever heard but also made no sense. Mermaids aren't math. I ask that question to a lot of kids. That's by far my favorite answer. I don't think I could declare any of my students as the stupidest, but one who wasn't the best at algebra definitely got the better of me one day. I was working with another teacher, Mr. S, in an incarceration setting for teenage boys. These young men would often ask questions to test boundaries, force reactions, and see. It's jail school, so it's a bit less formal. Anyhow, in a room of about 10 students, my co-teacher and I would do a funny man straight man routine. Typically, this would fall along the lines of my absolutely agreeing with anything my co-teacher said he knew about me, that I had a criminal record, that I used to weigh 320 pounds, that I'd been married 4 times, and see. Then, as the straight man, I'd play along and fill in details of what should have been obvious absurdities. One day, Mr. S went beyond the bounds of believability for our students when he said I had a tattoo of his name at the base of my right buttock. I maintained that this was true, that it was the result of a lost bet on a football season, but several of the boys weren't buying it. One of these said, Mr. For real, you got any tattoos? Nearly all of my students had several tattoos, typically visible. I was forced to admit I had none, but chose poorly in explaining myself. Okay, you're right. I don't have any tattoos. Why not? You have something against tattoos? Number. No, not at all. I just don't think I could make a decision like that. Like what? You know, saying, this is what I want for the rest of my life. Wait, mister, ain't you married? Raucous laughter from the class and I joined in. TLDR. A less than stellar student defeated my personal argument regarding tattoos by pointing out my wedding band. Studying gothic novels with my low ability, special needs group, and they were asked to say how they feel about horror films. My student came out with, I love horror films because they make me more aware of my surroundings. I was very impressed. Go, it is genuinely difficult to tell who is the stupidest. Kids are smart some days and clueless others. Some grow out of it. Anyway, we were talking about cheetahs being the fastest land mammal. Some inner city kid swells up and says he can beat a cheetah in a race. The class laughs. Kid doesn't let it go. Finally he just says I can beat a fat cheetah in a race. I'm just thinking, maybe? To be fair, it depends entirely on the distance of said race. In a college music history class, we were discussing the differences in sound between a harpsichord from the high baroque and today's grand piano. One student, who normally contributed little, said, the reason the 2 instruments sound so different is because harpsichord strings are plucked by quills, whereas piano strings are struck by hammers, and you'd make different sounds, too, if plucked or struck. It's a harp, liar. I don't wanna be dumb like my mama. Teacher at an inner city school for a time where almost all the students had free breakfast and lunch. Written about it before. Lots of the kids realized and knew they were in a no-win situation and a downward spiral in terms of education and situation in life. Quite a number of them tried their damnedest though to get out of it. Lots of times the kids don't know what is awaiting them at home. Many parents don't read to their kids or help them with homework. Many just can't because they themselves barely have an education. Or they are in just bad situations. One student came in and said their mama chose to pay the cable TV bill over the hot water bill. And another week their mom shot themselves in the hand with a gun she borrowed from some guy. Later the same mom chose to pay her cell phone bill over electricity. And that student had enough and decided to start studying and try to climb out. There is hope. I have a student in my class with autism. He is very high functioning but he is a couple years behind his grade level. We were discussing the American Revolution and one of the vocab words we had was tyrannical leader. I jokingly told the class that if I was ever the leader of the country that's the kind of leader I would be, and I went on to say that all of your teachers would be that way too. Most of the class looked at me blankly but this one kid with autism understood what I was saying and looked at me and while trying to contain his laughter says, "Well, that's because all teachers have a superiority complex." I just couldn't help but laugh in front of the class for the next 5 minutes. Absolute savage. I remember circumference because it sounds like circumcised. This is actually how my 10th grade geometry teacher told us to remember. My favorite student of all time in my 9 years of teaching was a kid named Logan. Logan was this giant kid, tall as I was, 5'2", in the 5th grade, and massive. Logan also had an information processing learning disability. He processed information more slowly than most people. He spoke very slowly and deliberately with long pauses, and just saw the world differently. Logan had learned early on that if he played dumb, people would treat him like he was stupid, and do his work for him. He had this look he would put on his face, mouth agape, lower lip hanging down, legit drooling, eyes unfocused, and he would refuse to speak to you. I figured that out really quickly, and after 2 times of me making him talk to me at recess when he refused in class, he didn't pull that look with me anymore. It was a complete facade. Anyway, because of how Logan processed the world, he would spend his recess slowly walking the grounds and picking up anything interesting he found. He found things no one else would find: coins, sequins, a box of sewing machine spools, etc. And he'd bring them to us teachers if he didn't know what they were or just wanted to share them with us. So one day at recess he comes up to me and the other teacher at recess duty with me, and he's holding a condom wrapper. He asks us what it is, and the other teacher quickly says, "Oh Logan, that's just a candy wrapper for grown-ups. Here, let me take that and throw it away." And Logan dead butt looks us in the face and says, "Oh good, I thought it was a condom, and those shouldn't be out here on the playground." And then he turned and ambled off. His emotional intelligence was incredibly high. I had a student with autism in class, Tyler. Tiny little guy, super sweet, but would have occasional severe meltdowns. I will always have the image in my head of tiny little Tyler, mid-meltdown, swinging his arms at giant Logan and screaming, while Logan simply stood there and took it and gently patted him on the head. TLDR. I don't care if it's too long and no one reads it. Logan was one of the best people I've ever met in my life and I have so many good memories of him. And Logan dead butt looks us in the face and says, "Oh good, I thought it was a condom, and those shouldn't be out here on the playground." My sides. Classic Logan. English as a second language teacher here. I specifically work with new to country students who have only just arrived in the US. One day a few years ago, I was trying to explain to my class why we were practicing a tornado drill. Many had never heard of a tornado, so I found a quick YouTube clip to show what they are. After we finished, one girl was visibly freaked out but very clearly wanted to be prepared for this monstrosity. So she took out her planner and asked me what days the tornado comes to the city. I tried to be consoling but inside I was laughing so hard. 5th grader gets negative for a volume answer. Me, negative volume? Think about that for a minute. 5th grader, couldn't that be for a black hole? He's incorrect OFC, but based on what he knows, that is some real lateral thinking. In that position, I wouldn't really know what to do. Can't say he's right, but I want to get the point across that he was really clever. I've been teaching for 10 years either to kids about to be kicked out of the system or at a school with mostly kids with low socioeconomic status and are learning English as a second language. Honestly, I don't even know how to gauge intelligence anymore. I've had AP kids in my class that can't figure out crap unless it's spoon-fed to them. I've had severely handicapped kids that are doing the best work in my class. I had a kid that has so low that I had to repeat the previous day's lesson to him every day and we never got very far, but he could ride his bike the 15 blocks home and navigate 3 different gang territories without incident. I've had kids that were headed to prestigious universities that couldn't figure out how to make a box of mac and cheese if they had to. I told him, "Sorry kiddo, I know, the struggle is real without missing a beat." He replied, "Yeah miss, but we in it. A real one." I realize I have better chances going to a trade school. College is overpriced, even for the academically inclined. I honestly wish someone would have said that to me straight out of high school. Trade schools are not pushed hard enough after HS graduation. Much better than wasting time and money on a degree that isn't guaranteed to land you a job. You have been visited by the magical sugar jar Puggo. He'll only share his sweetener if you comment "Surga please, Mr. Papa." Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.